In my opinion, sketching is one of the most vital skills that architects can learn, and I think, on the face value at least, most architects would agree with this statement, but very few architects seem to be able to articulate why it's so vital. To me, sketching is about exploring ideas and it's about having fun, and that's certainly the attitude one must have before starting to sketch, but at the same time it's very easy to get lost in the creative process and become messy. And I think there's this notion in the creative community that, the quality of sketches doesn't really matter because it's the quality of our ideas that is really important. And to some extent I agree with that statement, but I do think that good sketches are prerequisite for good ideas. To me, paying attention to sketching skills is a bit like having a good writing style. A bad handwriting will not necessarily break the poem, but if our words are legible, our sentence structure is clunky, the paragraphs are ordered in a weird way, then no matter how much effort we put in, the poem that we're trying to produce is going to be illegible. And I think the same applies to the sketching. If our strokes are not finished or not really confidently drawn, if our composition is off, there's not enough effort put into the sketching, then inevitably the lack of quality in our sketch will undermine the quality of our ideas. When I sketch something as a starting point, I always try to focus on the quality of strokes that I draw. I think good strokes or lines can make or break the drawing. If our strokes are done well, then it will improve the quality of the sketch, and vice versa. If the strokes are not done well, then it will undermine the quality of our sketch. What I usually do practically is I try to introduce a kind of wobble to the lines, which serves two purposes. The first one, it simply creates a nice aesthetical feel to the drawing and it gives that distinct architectural feel and look to it. But it also helps to control the line, so instead of kind of dragging a straight line that can lead us astray, when we introduce the wobble, it's easier to control the direction of that line. Another reason to pay close attention to line work is because most objects around us in the built environment are rectilinear. Most objects that we see around us, such as windows, doors, the corners, the shape of the rooms, furniture, everything pretty much consists of rectangles as a base object, because all of that comes down to the efficiency of the construction. And a good sketch attempts to replicate this reality that we have using straight lines or strokes. Now, one exercise that I found particularly useful is actually warming up before doing sketches. Now, why on earth would I warm up before drawing something? Well, I think it comes down to a couple of things. The first one, it purely helps me to relax a little bit before I start sketching. I noticed that if I don't kind of warm up or do other drawings beforehand, my sketches look clunky. So having a bigger piece of sheet that I would use before actually drawing something, and then practicing strokes in a horizontal, vertical, and then kind of sideways fashion, and eventually introducing ellipses and circles, I found that to be a really useful way to relax a little bit before then diving into the sketching. And typically if I do that on a bigger piece of paper than the one that I'm eventually going to be using, then the whole sketch feels a bit more relaxed, controlled, and convincing. Sketching really shines when it comes down to capturing the ideas and being spontaneous, and this is, I think, unmatched by software or apps that we typically use. Sketching doesn't require you to load, open, or save files. It's just about opening the sketchbook and starting drawing something. And I think this instant access that we have to our sketchbook and the connection between the pencil and our brain is really what drives most of the creativity, in my opinion. There is that ability of drawing something and then getting directly inspired by that next drawing and creating this perpetual process where we're kind of exploring ideas by getting inspired from the previous iterations of our sketches to then drive design forward. The other thing to mention is I think that it's really vital to be unapologetic about the sketches that we do and not be afraid showing it to other people. I think especially here in UK, a lot of architects do this thing where they draw something up and then they apologize about the quality of their sketches. And I think that's to do with the cultural setting, being modest is a virtue in UK, but I think it's unnecessary, especially if there's some effort put into the sketch. I think we should be unapologetic about what we draw. We should not be afraid to show our ideas despite perceived lack of quality on our part. I think if we put enough effort into the sketches, there's absolutely nothing wrong with showing them to other people and to look for feedback. This is probably easier said than done. It does require some practice and letting go of perfectionism, but I think if that skill is cultivated well, then it will lead up to more confidence confidence and better sketches in the end, and it will also help us to sell our ideas. If at any point I feel like I'm a bit low on ideas and creative energy and I need that extra spark of inspiration, then what sometimes helps is to switch up the medium. A simple way to go about it is just simply switch from the pen, if that's what you're drawing with, to a pencil or vice versa. Other times I would switch the type of paper I'm using from a regular kind of white paper to maybe a paper with a tint of color. Other times I would switch up the tools that I'm using to pastels, pencils, or markers, which oftentimes has a unique ability to sort of spark imagination in a different way, even if we draw exactly the same type of drawing. You know, there might be some things that we notice that were otherwise missing just because it gives a little bit of refreshment to the process. So next time when you're struggling with ideas, you know, try to switch up the medium. Who knows, maybe you're gonna get that breakthrough that you need in your creative process. By the way, it's worth mentioning that on this channel we do cover primarily digital drawing, and that, you know, the same techniques that I've covered so far in this video would apply to digital drawing. But when it comes to digital sketches, it's much harder to see the process of iterations quickly. For example, if we do drawings in our sketchbook or on a pile of paper, then it's always easy to come back and see where that sketch has come from. Or maybe there is this idea that we really thought is cool and we need to come back to it rather than continue in the direction that we went to. Whereas on digital tools, it's a bit more tricky because that specific layer where you have that breakthrough idea might be lost in a pile of layers, or it might be deleted or altered to the point where it's unrecognizable. So with that being said, I do hope you enjoyed this video. There's this other video that I'm going to link up over here that I made on a similar topic with a slightly different approach. I encourage you to check that video out if you enjoyed this one, because it will cover a lot of different ground on the subject of sketching like an architect. So I do hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.